Welcome everybody to today's event. We're so excited for you to join us here at the Sales Enablement virtual event at armyofsalesreps.com. We have two special guests to help kick off this session, and who better to do that than our friend Tamara Shank, the research director at CSO Insights, or the research division of Miller Hyman Group, and then Scott Santucci, President and Chief Growth Catalyst at Growth Enablement Ecosystems, and also the founder of the Sales Enablement Society. Tamara and Scott, thanks so much for joining, and how are you?
Fantastic.
Doing fine. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you joining.
Thanks for having me.
A fun event. I think this will be a great conversation to kick off. As I said, we've got a lot of people tuning in, hundreds in this session as we speak. Want to see if we can lay the foundation of sales enablement. You two are pioneers in that. But before we do, maybe you can each just take a quick intro, a quick minute, and tell us just a little bit about you. Tamara, do you mind starting?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you already introduced me perfectly. So in my role at CSO Insights, I'm focused on all things sales enablement. And we're currently conducting our fourth annual global sales enablement study. And since May, the book I co-authored with Byron Matthews is on the market about sales enablement, of course, a master framework to engage, equip, and empower a world-class sales force. And before I became an analyst, it's now 4 years ago, I was at T-Systems, a Deutsche Telekom company, the IT services company of Deutsche Telekom. And it was 2008, 9, 10 when I started to get aware of the term sales enablement. At this time, I had a business development role for an industry, and in parallel, I was co-leading the restructuring of our sales force. And I started to look at the question, how do we actually enable our sales force to achieve higher goals with less people? And I learned that there was not a lot to find, but what I could find was that we had, for instance, content at 35 different places. And then talking to our most successful sales professionals, we didn't even know about it. We didn't use a single one. So you could see there was a lot to do. And so we simply started where we had a senior executive sponsor at this time in the content portfolio area. And in 2010, I met Scott, who joined me on this journey for the next 4 years. And yeah, I had the pleasure during this time to evolve the topic really from an idea to a program, to a function, to a strategic global function, reporting then to the SVP Global Sales Ops. Wow. So it was quite a journey, and I could experience all the different facets of sales enablement.
Oh, I appreciate the story. So you really experienced the good and the bad of sales enablement. The bad being, I guess you said 2000.
And the pain that comes with it.
That's right. It was 2010, you said, where you kind of started to look for answers and couldn't find them. So it's been a while, and I want to talk about how far we've come in just a minute. So Tamara, thanks for the quick intro. Scott, over to you. Can you explain just a little bit of your story?
Sure. So my story begins maybe in the late 90s. I was tapped on the shoulder. I was our company's top rep, and I had some issues with our marketing department, and I voiced them. I made a case for basically how we could be better supported in the field to our CFO. Our CFO invited me to our executive committee meeting at the time, and lo and behold, I got a job, a brand new job. The title was the VP of Product Marketing and Management, but ultimately, we didn't have the term sales enablement there, but ultimately that's what it was about, which was combining our various products and services into ways to engage, and then the content required to do that engagement. Wow. Since then, I've been a VP of Sales and Marketing. I started the Sales Enablement Research Group at Forrester Research. That was in 2008. That's how I met Tamara. I left there and went into the world of management consulting. I founded the Sales Enablement Society, and today I've started my own firm this year, Growth Enablement Ecosystems. Wow. Along the way, I've probably engaged with done a lot of research with buyers, executive level buyers, 1,500 of them, as a matter of fact, both surveys and interviews. We've had the opportunity to interview CEOs with my CEO at Forrester, CFOs, VPs of sales, CMOs, really from a tops down perspective. So I have a great blend of perspectives, and somehow looking at sales enablement strategically has become controversial recently. And I think that's crazy. So
wow.
Interesting to talk about that.
Yeah. I want to get into a couple of those topics. You talked a little bit about enablement and product marketing, and then the controversial point we'll have to hear about in just a minute. But I got to admit, for the audience, again, Tamara and Scott, two absolute thought leaders. I think this session is going to be fantastic. So let's dive into it. I mean, you guys just started just the tippy of the iceberg there. But I just wanted to say, did you ever think we'd actually be here? You both started kind of pioneering this concept years ago. You've done a lot of work to establish sales enablement as a credible function in a company. The journey's been amazing, but when you both kind of set off on this journey, I just want to get your thoughts. Did you actually think you'd end here with founding an organization, bringing people together, et cetera, et cetera? Scott, just quick thoughts on that, or did you actually think we'd get here, or did you just kind of start it and try to figure it out back then?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot to that question. So the first one is, where actually is here? I don't want to get metaphysical, but I think the heart of it is, would we have a lot of these people around the movement? I don't know if I really think that way. The whole Sales Enablement Society started just by trying to get people locally together, because I know Tamara would agree with that. You have to get people talking about this because it's such a complex topic. If you put your head in the sand and avoid the complexity, you're going to miss the mark of making it simple for folks. Yeah. So there's this really big yin and yang between, who do you make things simple for? So I just really couldn't have expected that, starting from a local meetup group in DC 2 years ago, to have 5,000. There's 5,000 people involved in the Sales Enablement Society.
Wow.
15 countries. Never would have expected that. So I think it goes to show that there's a need. There's a big need. Important thing is there's a need to have conversations about it. So thank you for kicking us off there and doing this virtually at scale.
No. I again, happy to add to the fun. Tamara, what would you add to that? I know you again started in a little different place, but did you think you'd get a book out? Do you think you'd be thought as a thought leader? And to Scott's point, have a group of people who were anxious, 5,000 plus, who were anxious to gather to learn best practices?
No, not in the beginning. Definitely not. When I look back at this journey, it was, you begin to solve a problem you think is an isolated problem, and then you discover it is not. It is all connected to many different things. So you start in the content part, and you organize that and manage that. You see, actually, it's in the content, the problem. It's not just how we provide it. So then you start to fix that. You work with value messaging, and you connect the related training together. So okay, we're getting better at that. We're still far away from impacting the pipeline. So you're saying, okay, we're actually in the wrong place in the company. So we have to be in sales. We have to do things right. This is how we work a lot together, Scott and I, at this point, how to, evolve the function and how to create a business case so that we could move the whole thing into the Salesforce. And then all of a sudden, I got another executive sponsor who was really focused on that, and he liked the idea that there was somebody who could connect the dots between all these different training parts, all these different content and technology parts, and who had an idea how to bring that together on a sales process level and all these different things. And it became bigger and bigger, and it changed from doing different things to orchestrating the whole landscape. And I think that is one of the most important things for enablement leaders to understand. It's actually not about doing different things. It's about having the big picture and orchestrating all these different services along the customer's journey. Yeah. And that was also, in my experience, the biggest challenge, to help others to see we have to approach it from the outside to the inside. We have to think about it from a customer's path or customer's journey perspective backward. And that is so very difficult. You know, it sounds simple. My God, everybody wants to be customer-centric, and we are. And then we will look deeper at it. We are not at all. We're not even talking about that internally. Yeah. And then you see, you know, when I look back at orchestrating these different functions, and it is only sales and marketing. What we see in our research, sales enablement has to collaborate with almost every other function in the company. So, and the marketing relationship is actually not the worst one. There are others that have to be improved. So it's way more than that, and you have to formalize that. You also have to come up with a process landscape. How do we produce enablement services in a scalable and effective way at the same time? So that gets a different notion than being a learning expert or being an expert or being a content expert or being a tech expert. It's more how do we orchestrate all these different things to create something that's bigger than a single enablement service. So this perspective, really, we had to go through that. And when I look back at what we experienced at T-Systems, you know, in the last year from when I was there, it was so, hey, we actually missed the whole group of people, a key group with sales managers. So from today's perspective, I would start way earlier with the sales managers to help develop their coaching skills, because that has such a big impact. What I now see year over year in our research, it's actually the biggest, it's the most effective enablement service.
Coaching.
And it drives adoption, reinforcement of your initial enablement services. So that you cannot see that in the beginning. You have to go through it. You have to experience it. And I think that's what we can help others to see, to see things earlier and to create a framework that helps them to be more effective earlier.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like about you two is you've both been in the trenches, right? You've actually both been in enablement or enablement type roles, and so can absolutely speak from experience. I think one thing we need to probably lay the foundation on, and you two have been, again, pioneering at this, and that is just understanding really what sales enablement is and the definition of what enablement is. And it probably is a good place for some of those who are new, who are tuning in, just to lay that foundation so we're on the same page, what it is and why it's so important. Scott, I know you've done a lot of work on literally to putting the definition in place, and there's been some controversy around the concept. Maybe you can start and try to speak to both the definition and a little bit of the controversy.
Well, I have a picture here. I like to break things down for more analysts. So we have what's sales and then what's enablement. And it becomes a lot of conversations with folks and learn about the definition. It's let's concentrate on a box or a scope so when you think about sales, are you thinking about improving the performance of an individual salesperson? Is that sales? Is sales the performance of a person over a whole year? Is sales the performance of a sales manager's team? Is sales the performance of a specific sales region? Is sales the function, the whole function, including sales ops and sales engineers and all of that? Or is sales bookings? For me, sales is bookings. And sales is the bookings that ultimately turn into revenue after all the accounting issues and everything like that get factored in.
Fair.
So that's the first bucket. That's my perspective. Try to advocate. Other people can look differently, but I think step number one for anybody to be successful in this field, know what your scope is. My scope is bookings and revenue. That doesn't mean it needs to be everybody else's. The second question is enablement. What do you mean by that? There's basically two philosophies of how to help people. One philosophy is stuff for you. The other philosophy is I'm going to, teach somebody to fish and then they can feed their family, give somebody a fish and, they're kind of hooked on you. I'm of the teach people to fish. Yeah. And to me, enablement is on revenue or bookings. Then the enablement part is how do we streamline the entire supply chain behind the revenue generating activities? And when you look at it that way, the best thing that we can do to enable is to, and I love what Tamara said earlier on, you have to have a design and a structure to design out all the complexity. What happens today is you can have as many as 40 different people creating things to help sales. Honestly. And when 40 things that get created by 40 different people with their own lens of what sales needs, it's just overwhelming to an individual salesperson. Yeah. There is no design at the point of sale. There's no design at the point of conversation. And another thing I agree, you're going to hear an agreement love fest during this call with everything Tamara says. Another thing I agree with is the fundamental design point is we're not really clear on what the content our customers require because we want to build stuff about us and about our products, and our customers don't care anymore. So what we need to do is sales enablement, to me, to sum it up, is it's about enabling more by generating more bookings. So that's the sales part. And that's enabled by making sure that you have identified the right types of customers, understand what kind of relationship and information that they require with you. You model out, or you map that model of who those customers, you map out all of the messaging and packaging and value propositions to that customer, and then match the right salespeople, the right sales engagement, the right sales strategies, the right training strategies, the right tools to those modeled set of customers. That's what it is to me.
Got it. No, I love it. Tamara, what would you add to that? Or what points would you highlight?
So we, in general, we'll call it specifically Salesforce enablement. So we mean definitely the Salesforce, and to be more specific, all customer-facing roles and their managers. And that can cover, again, along the customer's journey from business development to sales to service. Because revenue comes not always from sales, it can come from different places as well. So the focus that's, I think, important, and Scott covered that, and what he pointed out, is strategic, it's collaborative. We call it a discipline. It comes in different forms and shapes, also depending on the maturity level of the organization. It is designed, so the important question also, why are we doing this? It's designed to increase predictable sales results, whatever that is for a company. Of course, revenue is included. And by providing consistent and scalable enablement service, I think that's an important point as well. It allows to have all the customer-facing professionals and their managers to have valuable, relevant, and differentiating interactions.
Got it. Interesting. Do you?
And that connects the dots to the buyer data, as Scott mentioned. And I've completely agree. It is absolutely important to look at the buyers first. So we did this year our first buyer study, look at 500 executive buyers globally. And it's just really important to work backwards from what is it they want, what is it they observe, how do they want to engage with a vendor organization at the different stages of their customer's path. So it's really important to start from there.
Interesting. Do you guys feel I mean, Scott, you mentioned controversy just a little bit. If you can highlight that, what's been the controversy around enablement as you guys have really got this kind of kickstarted?
I think there's a couple dimensions of it. I think number one is a lot of people get tapped on the shoulder to fix broken things. Yeah. And with that sense of urgency and lack of clarity, there's a massive resistance to anything that's strategic. The words, that's theoretical and it's just rejected flat out. That's a big thing. So I hear a lot of conversations about rejection of theory and not a lot of questions about, well, why am I a department that has one person doing it? How can I learn from the people that have 500 people doing it? Right. That's one area. I think another area is an area of contention is the definition. Yeah. No matter what, and that's why I sort of deflected a little bit on saying, there isn't really a standard definition, because frankly, what I found is that people try to define it for themselves to tell their family what they do. Yeah, right. That's one thing. Another thing is, how do I explain it to the rest of the organization? And guess what? Everybody's going to look at it differently inside your organization. If you don't get your own view of it, you can't shop it internally. Yeah. So the internal selling of this emerging role is really important. And all you have to do really to figure that out is go back maybe 10 years ago and ask former brand executives what they had to deal with advertising. Everybody's an expert on what a great ad is. No one has any idea what the purpose of it is or what the metrics are, et cetera. So in a lot of ways, sales enablement is like that. You have to really make that concept resonate with a lot of folks. And unfortunately, you can't do that without a strategy.
Yeah. I've liked that. I mean, I've followed you, Scott, and I feel like rather than forcing everybody in one direction, I feel like you have been loose to help people try to find their own path and something that does resonate to them. So I can appreciate that approach. I want to get into kind of two quick tactical questions. One is just actually deploying an effective sales enablement model. And tomorrow I'm thinking about your book that I'd picked up recently and read through it. And I was fascinated by this concept of the Salesforce enablement clarity model that you talked about. It really was designed, if I understood it right, to kind of bring a common focus and alignment to this whole enablement process. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but as companies think about deploying enablement, can you explain the structure briefly and how you would guide people to start thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just one thought to the definition. I completely agree with what you both said. An organization has to find their own perspective on it. But in order to get there, if you can look what's around, how others define it, how others look at it, how the industry is looking at it, it helps you to create this frame of reference for your organization. What's right at this point in time at a certain maturity level. So a definition can only do one thing, to get a few people on the same page, but It doesn't help you to implement enablement in any way. So therefore you need a framework that helps you better to do that. And I know Scott has created a couple of frameworks earlier as well to help organizations to do that. So the clarity model, we look at it as, Scott, you mentioned that there are so many people in an organization who want to help sales. And they also do it from their own perspective. And that creates a lot of confusion for the sales force. And it ends up in a certain reality that they simply use what they always use, what's on their laptop, what worked last week, or what the colleague used during the last meeting. So in order to orchestrate that, it's first of all important to see, okay, well, what's out there? And then to consider this as a rough diamond.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of good things already existing in an organization, but there are also a lot of things you actually don't need. And we don't talk enough about what do we stop doing? What do we actually stop doing? This picture come from a rough diamond and look at a cut and polished diamond. And it means if you want to cut your diamond and you have to polish it, you have to have a vision and a strategy before you cut, and you have to know what you cut.
Right.
And that's the idea of getting the design point right, working backwards from the customer's path to create a foundation that's built on a vision and a strategy, and ideally a formalized enablement charter that simply defines what is my scope at the current stage in this company, what are our goals, what do we need to achieve with enablement right now. But having this bigger vision in place so that we know what are we working towards. And then there are different facets. What is my target audience right now? Do I provide my services for salespeople, for their managers, for a channel, for service personnel, or whatever my scope is? And then I look at the facets in the middle. So there's one green facet, that's the facet of enablement services. That's what your audience actually sees from you. Is that piece of content? Is that a tool? Is that a certain training service in whatever modality? Is that a coaching service, whatever that is? And then all the other facets are actually the inner workings of sales enablement. What do I need to do as an enablement leader to run this? I need to organize my cross-function collaboration in one way or another, at least role-based. Who's doing what? For playbook, for a training service, for whatever, for my enablement content platform as an example. And then I need, of course, to think about technology, enablement content solutions, learning solutions, training solutions, coaching tools, and powered by AI, ideally integrated into the CRM so that's all in one workflow for salespeople. And then I also think about what we call enablement operations. How do I run this function in a cost-efficient way and also in a scalable way? What is my governance model for enablement? How do I engage my senior executives? Can I report progress and also make strategic decisions happen? How do I set up a process that I can produce and deliver consistent enablement services? And very important, how do I measure success?
Yeah.
And it also depends on the different phases. Where am I in my organization with enablement? How I can actually measure success.
Yeah, interesting. I loved kind of just the framework to start asking yourself those types of questions as you think about deploying something that is aligned, is effective. Scott, you've obviously coached hundreds of organizations through the actual alignment, through the deploying of a model, of a process. Thoughts from you on just thinking how organizations can start thinking about that kind of deployment of a model?
Sure. So I want to have some visual aids.
Here we go.
Here's a picture. Sorry, it's a top hat. It's the only way that I can sort of envision a buyer, like a monopoly. I wanted to draw the monocle and everything. There's the amount of money. What we have to do is we have to realize that our buyers aren't homogeneous. There's actually, just like us as buyers, Gabe, if you were going to go put an addition on your house, you wouldn't just go on Google and find the lowest cost provider, right? In the checkout line, or if you go to Costco, if you're like me, I'm just pulled to that buy 2 get 16 free. So what we're talking about is completely different perceptions of value. And I'm making this super simple. The first part is, do your customers not know what the heck they want, or do they absolutely know what they want? And if they absolutely know what they want, guess what? You are in a highly competitive environment, and it's going to be price driven, period, accept it. Yeah. So figure out a way to streamline your sales model that way. If they don't know what they want, don't try to mix and match and throw 8 million different salespeople at it either, because you're not helping them configure it. Mm-hmm. So then when you realize what is our pattern that we're after, everything is different. Your sales model, your marketing model, everything. So the first goal is to align that. But then the way to get real measurable results, so this is a little bit busier, but this says customer verifiable outcomes. I am math oriented, and the thing that I love to do is I think that we're measuring way too many things. I worked with a client on one of their cloud strategies, measuring 2,187 different metrics associated with sales.
Wow. I love it. Wow.
That's insane.
Can you do some more?
That's insane. But this is what we're doing to ourselves. Right. And let's go and look at any company. And I want any company that's got a sales operations group to really do an honest look at what metrics you're providing out there and ask yourself why. Yeah. For me, the way to get started of moving this is, I love what Tamara said earlier on about focusing on the pipeline. What these graphics are is a way to start out. So once you figure out what you're trying to sell, then what we need to do is we now isolate where can we add value. So the first one is it's P. The first is P, our target population. Do we know who our right audience is?
Yep.
Very few companies, Gabe, is shocking, actually can say this specifically is our economic buyer and can name a role.
Yeah.
We talk about personas in general, but there actually has to be a buyer.
Yeah.
And then the second thing then is, okay, now that we know that, then that's great. Then at least the messaging that we go has a voice. Then the second part then, does that buyer agree to meet with us? Our customers vote not only with their time. And if we don't have very targeted techniques to compete with all the noise out there to get our targeted buyer to spend time with us, we can't get on first base. So that's a yes or no. Did Gabe agree to meet with me or not?
Yeah.
The next part then is, did we have a successful meeting? How do we measure binarily whether we're meeting or not? Well, Gabe says, Scott, I'm willing to explore that with you.
Yeah.
Verifiable, yes or no. And the next one is Gabe going to have to buy in to what I'm talking about, or else you can't buy it. It's not because you agree or disagree. It's you have to get your team to buy into it. So the next step is that shared vision stage. Our team buys into it. Scott, everybody's excited. Let's move on to our next stage to figure out what our business agreement would look like. Yeah. And then that's the last one, is the business case, where you say, yeah, let's do it or not. In each one of those buckets, when you look at a pipeline that way, you can verify it very quickly. But what I'm finding is the sales that are, everybody wants to go after this person here because that's the most profitable one. Yep. When you look at pipelines here, they don't look like funnels. They look like boa constrictors that have eaten a pig. Most are stuck here.
Interesting.
Because we cannot, we just don't have the tools to help people help your stakeholder, you, Gabe, get the buy-in of all the people inside your organization.
Yeah.
So I think that the point is really break it down into something simple, right? So you can measure it. Don't try to go galactic and sign up for what the VP of sales wants, because it's not going to be precise enough. Right. And ultimately, you're going to get blamed for that failure. Your first step forward has to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like, I mean, you mentioned the VP of sales, Scott, and I felt like this came up just as you were introducing it, working with product marketing. There's obviously a lot of operational elements. As people think about structuring sales enablement, any tips or advice? Should it roll into the VP of sales? Should it roll more into the operational side of the business? Should we make sure that we have a coaching enablement and an ops or an analytics role? Or any advice on the structure of a successful enablement function? Maybe
I think Tamara will be better at addressing that. I want to make sure that this point gets out there. When we start talking about structure, what happens is I see people paralyzed and think they can't do anything. Let's start with, you can do something right now.
Yeah.
If you're in product marketing,
absolutely,
own the fact that you need to make who your buyer is clear. Get out of the idea of a persona and say, these are the targeted roles, and map out who is the decision maker, who's the person that's going to approve the wallet and spend. You can do that. You can also, as a product marketer, move away from, say, the product launch checklist and come up with a different kind of checklist, maybe a go-to-customer checklist instead of a product-based checklist. You can challenge internally and say, hey, is my role product marketing, is that good, or should I be, whoever our buyer is? Buyer advocacy is maybe what my role should be. There's a lot of things you can do. And that's just coming from a marketing standpoint. You can go through that checklist anywhere. If you look at this, there's millions of things any one person can do to start making it simple today. Yeah. So I don't want to get in the business of saying, where it should reside or not. You'll decide where it should reside once you start making success, which is what Tamara did. She started getting success, and she made her own mark. That's why I think it's better for her to answer more of this question.
No, I love that, though. I mean, let's be results focused. Sometimes it's ready, fire, ready, aim, fire. And sometimes, it should be, ready, fire, aim. Let's be more results focused. Tamara, you've obviously been in kind of the nitty gritty of it. Any coaching you'd provide on structure or thinking about that?
Yeah, first of all, when you begin with it, I would not worry about the structure and where you are. So, I mean, I literally was not even aware what I was doing, but I said there was a problem we have to fix. And I found myself in the portfolio department. It was very strange at this time, reporting to the SVP portfolio management. And this person had a big challenge to organize a new product portfolio for an IT services company that came from, we all sell individual stuff. So the reason for being there was an executive sponsor, there was budget, there was attention and priority. And when you have these ingredients, then stay there and start to move the needle from there. There is no right or wrong where it gets started. It's more important what's the problem you want to solve and what's the vision you want to get to. And then you see as you move forward what needs to be added, what needs to be changed. And then we were at a certain point when the stakeholder simply said, no, my role is portfolio. If you want to do a bigger thing, it's not me. So we know this because when this happened. So it's not me because this is my bucket and sales is over here. I get this, it's a bigger picture, but that's not me. So this is then, and I started to look how can we move that into sales? So other organizations that begin with content issues start usually in marketing.
Yeah.
It's usually not the area in an organization where sales enablement remains when it gets more strategic and it covers more things. So what we see now at Sales Insights in the data is sales enablement is in sales. It's now for 4 years in a row. It's a very strong data point. It's between 60 and 70% report to executive sales management. So smaller organizations report more to executive sales management. Larger organizations have a bigger portion of enablement teams that report into sales ops. However, the relevance of sales ops is a bit decreasing. It's now more often seen at enablement operations, where there's two sides of the same coin. So one part is actually providing the foundation and it's designing a selling system, and the other one are enabling then all the resources that should create the business. And then that's how I would ideally see it nowadays. But usually you don't start there. But having the vision, this is what we want to do, this is a way to get there. And we also see a few organizations that have enablement reporting into operations roles, into COO roles, or also into CX roles.
Right.
So if you think this customer path thinking forward, then you could definitely say, okay, a customer experience role that looks at the customer experience we create for all our relevant buyers along their customer path, that could also be a good place. What I would always suggest is look for a place that has a more strategic long-term business focus. If you report into a function that is simply focused on operational efficiency, that's probably not the right place for enablement to be. Because simply whatever we do, it's not moving the needle this quarter. It takes some time until we see the results.
Yeah. So there is a lot that potentially goes into that. Different functions, different size of companies, etc. I want to slowly move to kind of the wrap here, but I wanted to end with this question. This idea of where are we going from here? A lot of talk about artificial intelligence, sales enablement obviously uses a lot of tools. It's an emerging function. Scott, maybe we can start with you. Where do you see, or how do you see sales enablement changing in the next 5 years?
I think what we're going to see is over the next 5 years, we're going to see a big sorting out. So just like the meteor hit the planet in 60 million years and it wiped out the dinosaurs, and then thank God the little furry creatures evolved and we evolved with it. The mammals came. We're going to see the same sort of sorting out, except in a highly, highly, highly compressed state. What we are in right now is a state of, you mentioned technology, way, way, way massive overhype. We've had, in 2008, there were 100 people who were doing sales enablement that were trying to brief me at Forrester. Today, depending on who you talk to, there's over 3,500 different suppliers that say they're doing some version of it. That is massive, massive, massive growth, and it creates a lot of noise and a lot of confusion.
Wow.
Unfortunately, the 96, 98% of those 3,500 firms aren't going to make it. They're going to die off.
Yeah.
And they're going to go through massive extinction events, but they're not going to go out quietly. They're going to go out with more noise. So what we have to do is we have to take a lot of this technology with a grain of salt. Technology only exists to help out. So technology enables a process. If you enable a crappy process, you're going to get a crappy outcome. Yeah. So what I see that's going to happen is we're going to start hopefully move to conversations about what works, not what people's best practices are, and start challenging folks. Because what works is going to be different based on different patterns. There's different buying patterns. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all monolithic Salesforce. It's ridiculous that we still talk that way. It's 2018, people. And when we start to embrace a more federated model, a more egalitarian or libertarian type model that says, let's build integrated teams around supporting customers, what we're going to find is that we're going to need to integrate a concept. We're going to need to learn how to collaborate. We're going to need to learn to reorg, not to where it's just individual people, it's teams. Then we're going to need to figure out team-based processes and learn how to work it. And then we're going to need to focus on the technology that manufactures that process or scales that collaboration. Today, very few companies are looking at that. They're saying, hey, let's throw AI at it, or let's throw this tool at it, let's throw that tool at it. And it just doesn't work. And it hasn't been working, and it really hasn't ever worked. Yeah. So we need to have a come to Jesus, I guess, as an industry there. And I think it's going to happen in the next 5 years. Yeah.
This focus on process first, technology, AI second, you see as kind of being fundamentally something we've got to nail down. Tamara, what would you add to that?
Yeah. It's just the relevance that we really need to understand what technology is doing, and especially as there's a more and more AI-based solution. So it's no longer true that we define a model and the technology is simply doing what we ask to do it. Now there's machine learning systems, and they evolve what they are doing, which is what they learned over the last couple of years.
Right.
So it's more and more important that we really, really understand what is this piece of technology doing and what is it measuring. Then we can have, there are great solutions out there. If you look at lead effectiveness and lead generation qualification, there are great tools that can create a lot of value for organizations. Yeah. But as enablement leaders and sales leaders or ops leaders, we really have to understand what the technology is doing. And what I currently see is that there are many organizations out there where people don't know what the piece of technology really does. So we measure a lot of things, and we don't really know what is this metric saying. Yeah. What does it mean? And I think we have to really get back to, first of all, we need to understand what we want to measure. We need to understand what is this specific metric really saying, and how do I want to use it moving forward. So these are just the 2 cents to add to technology. I think it's a very fast movement, and we just have to make sure that humanity remains faster than the technology. And I think that's at a kind of tipping point. So really need to be focused on that. And where is it going? I think it's more and more going towards the customer experience and service roles, so they were included. So what we see, if we check in our data, what's the impact on quota attainment, on win rates, on revenue, just as an example, then you see the biggest impact is usually on quota attainment. For some enablement, there is that Salesforce productivity. On win rate is more Salesforce performance. Yeah. But revenue, it is not necessarily Salesforce productivity, because we all know these wonderful deals that come in at December 24th from our CEOs, and we all want to have these deals, of course, because they make up right the year. That the deal brings in the revenue, but it doesn't tell anything about the productivity of the Salesforce. It isn't where we simply have to really focus on what we want to measure. Yeah. So we see more and more service impact, and of course in a transactional ways, and there's more and more online buying. So what is really what we have to enable? What do we need to measure, and how can see the impact? And what we're always seeing, we measure way too many lagging indicators, but especially as enablement leaders, we have to see early on what we're doing, especially if we have 9 or 12-month sales cycles. We need to know in this quarter, when we are rolling out an initiative, we have to see, are we going in the right direction? So it is close collaborations with sales managers and operations is really, really important to measure leading indicators such as conversion, is to see, are we doing the right things? I really put my focus on there, because enablement leaders have to survive every quarter. They have to report something positive every quarter to engage their executive sponsors.
Oh, I love it. Well,
to be able to drive a longer strategy.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like we've got some fun things ahead. I've kept you both longer than I expected, but there was a lot of great information. Any last comments as we kind of leave here? Scott will give you just kind of a parting word, and then Tamara.
So it's more a parting concept to draw a contrast. Please. We talked earlier on about the definition of sales enablement. I'm not saying I disagree with Tamara. What I'm saying is, here's a different perspective.
Yeah.
When your focus is on the overall revenue, and you have a company where a large portion of your deals are coming from your CEO, you have to ask the question, why do we even have a Salesforce? And that's what's interesting is what's happened recently is that I've been getting a lot of inbound requests and conversations from private equity leaders. And basically the overall gist is they're frustrated with growth in general.
Yeah.
And the first question is, what's the difference or who should do what, sales or marketing? That's sort of a lead-off conversation. And my answer to them is, I don't understand the point of your question. If you want to create value for your investors, your companies need to be creating value for your customers. So we need to be looking at this as a value communications process. No dissimilar than the global supply chain process that gets us manufacturing. We need to think about it more strategically. And they always pause and they always say, oh my gosh, you're right. And this another question that often comes up is, tell me the difference between sales enablement and sales operations. And my answer is, well, you own these companies. What do you want from them? And really what they're after is overall productivity. They want to see efficiencies. And I think the reason that when you talk about it, I don't like to look at quota because quota is an arbitrary setting. And when you go and look at the source of how people create quota, more often than not, it's about products and it's about some sort of hedge.
Yeah.
I like to look at the overall results. And when you look at the overall results, basically 20% of your sales force is driving the bulk of your activity, and the decisions that you make are choking them off. Right. So I guess the point is, depending on where you look at it, I'm not saying that we have to not also look at the efficiency of the overall sales force, depending on what permission you have to attack. I'm just saying, look at the difference of lenses based on how you choose to define it and how comfortable you are having those conversations.
Yeah, interesting. Tamara, what would you kind of final or parting words here?
Yeah, first of all, for sales leaders, they should really understand the concept of sales enablement as a strategic discipline, as an engine that should be designed to drive the necessary Salesforce transformation in the digital age. That's more the bigger part. And then if you look at it one level below, it really starts with the customers. It really starts also in our own language we use in our sales meetings to start with customers. And very often we don't talk about the customer at all, not even about a customer-centric metric at all. So if I look at the main results of our buyer study, they do 70% define their requirements on their own, 44% define their own solution before they want to talk to a salesperson. And if we ask them, what are your top 3 resources when you want to solve a business problem? Guess what? Only 23% said, yeah, one of my top 3 would be to talk to a salesperson. What is that telling us? It's telling us salespeople are more or less not perceived as value creating. They are perceived as sales tools. That is the big challenge. And that is what my mission is, the sales enablement. We really have to change that so that customer-facing profession, whatever their title is, that they can be relevant, valuable, differentiating in each interaction. So that's really the big mission, the big goal behind it.
Wow, interesting. All right. Well, guys, thanks so much. Fascinating conversation. We're over time, but I wanted
to could go on and on.
I can tell that. I know Scott could go on forever, and it sounds like you could as well. So we'll stop it at that. Wanted to thank both of you for joining. Great content. Hopefully the audience enjoys it. We hope that you'll enjoy some of the other sessions during today. Tamara, thanks so much for joining. Scott, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thanks. This is great.